Leaders, owners, and managers everywhere are wrestling with the idea of having part of their work team operating remotely. And it's not a comfortable feeling if you're in that seat and have that responsibility. But today we're going to dive deep into that subject. We're going to get some ideas on how you as a manager can overcome that. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I am your host, Doug Thorpe. And as we said in the lead-in, we're going to tackle a very hot topic that I run into almost daily as I'm out working with my clients, both big and small, trying to wrestle with modern day workforce dilemmas. The big challenge everyone's facing is a great majority of the workforce wants to be able to work remotely, or at least have the option to do so. And I run into a lot of managers that are struggling with that. They're trying to figure out, how do you really build teamwork? How do you build trust? How do you build collaboration? All of those things. My guest today wrote a book, and but even before I get to him, I want to share that one of the opening lines in the book says, "When teams work remotely, managers often ask, how can I manage them if I can't see them?" Well, there's a lot of hair on that question, and we're going to dig into that. My guest today is Dr. Seth Silver. Seth, greetings. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, so Seth has written a book that has tackled this dilemma. And before we get into all that, Seth, tell us a little bit about your background and some of the motivation for putting this piece of work together.
Sure. So the quick elevator speech biography is originally from Canada, came to the United States, went to Cornell, went to Xerox, spent 8 wonderful years doing internal consulting, left there and became a freelance consultant and finished my doctorate and taught part-time master's level students. But in the last 20 years or so, I have been doing all kinds of work with all kinds of organizations, really in 2 areas. One on leadership, helping develop leaders at all levels. And the other is creating great, engaged workplaces. And I do believe those things interact. I think
Absolutely.
Great leaders create great workplaces create great leaders. And, I like to look at the glass half full. I was blessed with the COVID vacation, meaning my work turned off, basically everything I had booked in mid-March 2020. And I recognized that was the opportunity I'd been waiting for actually for years to write the book that was all up here, and got busy in April. And my colleague and co-author, by the way, Tim Franz, good friend, and he and I collaborated. And by November of 2020, it was done, and we had publishers ready to go with it. And that's my background.
Yeah. So tell us a little more about the thrust of the book.
Well, I like to tell people that the book is largely about 3 things. It's about the mindset of meaningful partnership. And it really is a mindset. It's an outlook in which you look at your partner, and I'm using partner in the broadest sense of the word. So your partner is your manager, your partner are your colleagues, your partners could be key external parties with whom you are dependent and upon whom you are dependent for the quality of your work and what you do and how you do it. So it's taking that level of partnership to the next level. We call it meaningful because it has impact, it has legacy, it has significance. We define it as an elevated state of connection, cohesion, coordination, and collaboration. So it's a mindset of, I can't succeed unless my partner succeeds, and I must be thinking about, how do I help them? How do I support them and help them achieve? Because if I do that, they're going to do it back for me. So that's the first part. The second part is the soil in which this crop grows, and we call that ERTAP, E-R-T-A-P. It's a psychological model, and it suggests that when there's partners at work, they must have high mutual empathy, E, they must have high mutual respect, R, they must have high mutual trust, T, they must have alignment, and then that leads them to a state of partnership, which we then call meaningful partnership. And the third piece of the book is this process. In fact, really much of the book is written describing the process and sharing stories of how it's worked with clients, real clients. And the process is called the Workplace Covenant. Some people think that word covenant is religious. We don't mean it that way. It's a binding promise between two parties, which has obligatory weight. That's the word we decided to use. We didn't like workplace commitment. We didn't like workplace promise. We didn't like workplace, gee, I'll try if I can when I feel like it, because all those things are nebulous, right? We break promises, we break commitments, we break, I'll do it when I get around to it. I'll try, right? Do or do not, there is no try, says Yoda. So we call it a workplace covenant because we want it to have a stronger bond. And so these three things are really the essence of the book. The book also, of course, includes real case stories. It includes what can go wrong. It includes tips for facilitation of the workplace covenant process. So for those readers who are in HR or consultants themselves or eager managers who want to do this without hiring a third party or engaging their own HR people, basically a recipe how-to is in the book. And we share a bit of research too, because it's evidence-based. This is not just something that, kind of flew off our heads and out of our other parts of our anatomy. This is evidence-based. We've measured empathy, respect, trust, alignment. We've measured performance, empowerment, and engagement, and we have found this really works.
That's great. Well, like I said, this is a hot topic, and it is continuing to be a big one. And in many cases that I run into, the proverbial elephant in the room that nobody seems to want to talk about, because the understanding between employer and employee that might have existed before somehow has gotten disrupted at best, totally fractured at worst. And as people now emerge from this, I call it the fog of COVID, we're trying to get back to some notion of reality. And I think employers, owners, leaders, managers need to revisit and get that alignment on just what that agreement needs to be. I love your word covenant, and I too have run into that pushback that sounds like too much of a religious word, and it's not in this context.
Right. Well, lawyers use it too, by the way. I think lawyers talk about, a covenant between person A and a tenant and a landlord or something. I mean, it's not unheard of in non-religious discourse, but some people.
And I'm an old banker, and we had it all over our loan documents. There were loan covenants, that a borrower had to follow to maintain the status of his loan. And if any one of those were broken, we could call the loan at any time. So that definitely, it's a word that's out there, but I think it's safe to say modern vernacular, if you're not a lawyer or you're not a theologian, you don't use it much.
Right. Fair enough. And we weighed heavily the title of the book. Just a quick 20-second aside here. The working title of the book until probably actually, it was after we got accepted by the publisher. The working title that was accepted by the publisher was The Workplace Covenant, how managers and leaders can create meaningful partnership.
Yeah.
And then we realized we had that backwards. We had the cart before the horse, because the goal is this state of meaningful partnership. The how you get there is the workplace covenant team process.
And I was real excited about being able to do this today, knowing your work and what it is, because I've been on a bit of a tear, you might speak. I just published an article in my blog that has to do with challenging leaders to think about revisiting those discussions with their employees. And in my article, I just left it at the simple contract idea that when a contract exists, two parties come together, you make pledges to each other, you say, I'll do this, you do that, and if that happens, here's the benefit to both parties, so on and so on. And the point of my article was, I think we've eroded that understanding, and whether or not it's directly related to onboarding new employees in the midst of the pandemic, where you don't have the day-to-day personal contact, or whether it's just simply an evolution of the workplace where we leave too much to implied values and assumed understanding of things. The employer's thinking, well, this person was hired, they saw the job description, they know what they're supposed to do, and then the person shows up for work and they're not looking at that at all. They're just trying to figure out, how do you turn on this computer and what do I do from here?
Well, if I can jump in, I think the COVID pandemic and the working from home intensified feelings of alienation, isolation, and anxiety. Those have always been there. People have always felt them, but in particular, especially working remotely, it intensified it. And people felt unappreciated and unsupported. I mean, this is what I've noticed in 24 years of consulting is, and the statistics, why do people leave a job voluntarily? Well, HR people will tell you for the last 70% of why anyone leaves a job voluntarily is because they want to get away from their boss. They leave companies to leave their boss. But it's also true that bosses feel unsupported and bosses feel alienated. It turns out bosses are human beings too. Who knew? And managers can sometimes feel unsupported by their team. And so Tim and I came to this conclusion. It's a two-way street of frustration.
Yeah.
And so I do executive coaching. I was actually on the Zoom just yesterday with a guy up in Canada. He's a middle manager. He's part of a coaching program. I'm working with him. He just changed jobs within the larger government organization that he's part of because he didn't feel appreciated, didn't feel supported. His boss just didn't seem to recognize his talents. And I hear this all the time.
Yeah.
And so this situation is so common where you have employees who are there trying to do their best, but they have needs or ways in which they would like to be supported that they haven't expressed. So their manager doesn't know. Their manager has ways and means in which they want to be supported and they haven't expressed it. So you have a lot of misunderstanding. And then we call it the dreaded 4Ds in the book. I don't know if you got to that chapter, but we talk about the dreaded 4Ds, which Tim and I kind of jokingly say is an homage to the Princess Bride, if you like that movie, because there was the dreaded forest or the dreaded pirate and the swamp of dread or something. Anyway, the dreaded 4Ds are as follows: dissatisfaction, disengagement, despair, and then departure. And we think that people go through these sequentially. They get pissed off at some point and they feel dissatisfied because they're not getting the support, the encouragement, the pay, the advancement, the appreciation they want. So they go through periods of weeks or months dissatisfied. If it goes on too long, they become disengaged, a nice technical HR term, which means they're tuning out. They're not bringing their full selves to work. They're looking around for something else.
Kind of the quit and stay syndrome.
Yes. Quit in place, right. And if that goes on too long, they actually get despairing and depressed, in which they feel they're wasting their life. I mean, God, I'm at this terrible job. My boss will never change. My colleagues will never change. These customers are terrible. I don't want them ever. And you feel like you're wasting your potential. And then you leave, departure. And so we've seen this time and again. And, if I can use the analogy of a virus and a vaccine, that's the virus, the 4Ds. The vaccine is meaningful partnership. I think everyone wants it. If you actually define what it is, I think the younger generation in particular are seeking that. And you talk to people under 30 who are in the workplace, they want to know what they are doing has meaning. They want real relationship with colleagues. They don't want the facade and the superficial and the stupid. They want to know that their job is having an impact and that what they're doing day in, they're willing to work hard. There's a myth that the Gen X or Gen Y or Z or whatever they're called now don't want to work hard. I think that's crap. I have a 25-year-old who busts his hump and works 60 hours a week, but he does it because he believes in it, and his friends from his age group are the same, but they want to know there's meaning. So this notion of meaningful partnership really is the vaccine. It's the establishment of, reciprocal obligations and expectations, an agreement. If you and I are in this covenant relationship, what do you need from me? What do I have to do to help you feel supported and be successful? Those are the two big things. What do I have to do, Doug, to help you feel supported by me and be successful in what you're doing, and then vice versa. And it's documented and it's signed and it's reflected on, and feedback is exchanged on a routine basis. And it turns out if you actually have that and follow it, it creates ERTAP and it creates a mindset of partnership.
And so let's talk about that scenario just from day one. So I'm a new employee. I'm going to come to work for you, and you want to sit down and have this covenant discussion with me. If you want to do good old coaching form, let's just role play a little bit. How would you introduce that idea or bring it up or engage in that discussion?
Well, welcome to Acme Corporation, Doug. we're a wonderful organization, been serving customers for 35 years, and the reason we're in business is ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-dum. And if you were my only employee, we would certainly have it directly. If you were one of the team, I would say, let's get together with the whole group. But what we want to talk about is how I, as the manager, can make sure that you as a team member of the staff, direct report, feel supported and can be successful, because you're coming with skills and you're coming with a desire to contribute and lots of energy. And I assume for purposes of this role play that you are an experienced hire, not a new hire. The situation might be a little different with someone brand new, but you're coming with skills and experiences. So we want to help you hit the ground running. And so I want to make sure you feel supported and can be successful. In turn, I work in a political environment, not political in the bad sense, but I have a manager and I have peers, and there's a board and a president, and so I exist in a ecosystem of other managers. I too need to feel supported, and our team needs to be successful. So I need things from you and you need things from me. So it's an equal relationship. And what we would do is take about 3 hours. If I was self-facilitating it, I would do that. Otherwise, I'd bring in an HR person or a consultant type. And we would exchange, what do we owe each other? What do we expect from each other? And what questions do we have with respect to our partnership? And that process of exchanging. So your obligations would be here, my expectations would be here, and we would talk about them and merge them. And then in turn, my obligations would be here and your expectations would be here, and we talk about them and we'd merge them, and that becomes a covenant. We'll get some more detail on that, but that's what that would look like.
I like it. And I think that is just so incredibly vital. And Seth, you may have data on this, but I, for a long time, have come to the opinion that if you as an employer have done a reasonably good job selecting a person to be on your team, I know that's a big if, but if you have, and we've got ways and systems to be much better at that now, if you have done that, that person is going to show up wanting to do the right thing. They don't want to do a bad job. Just, I mean, in terms of, internal value structure. So I've always contended that leaders and managers have the obligation of helping explain what the right thing looks like. What is success in this situation, either at the team level or the company level, and really be sure that employees can get their head around that and have clarity. I can't tell you how many teams I've walked into in larger businesses where when you really get to the heart of the matter, the team doesn't have a clear line of sight on what that greater good is supposed to look like.
Yeah, and that's a fault, as you say, of the manager in communicating vision. A quick story that maybe is illustrative. It's in the book too, and I jokingly call it the origin story. And it's not Darwin and it's not Genesis, but it's where this whole notion of a workplace covenant started. And a long time ago, in a universe far, far away, I worked at the Xerox Corp, and I was that internal consultant working with engineering teams, both in Los Angeles and upstate New York. And I kind of divided my time, and we're about 5,000 employees just in this division and about 500 managers. My role was to do self-directed teams, customer service training, leadership training, coaching training, all kinds of things to help them be better managers. And sometimes I did team building. And here's how that process would work. I would sit down one-to-one with the manager, and Xerox took team building very seriously back then. So it was often a day off-site at a golf course or a hotel or some other off-site nice venue. And I would sit down with the manager a few weeks in advance and say, hey, Doug, we're going to be off-site at the ABC Golf Club, and it's going to be your whole team, and it's away from work for a day. What do you need to accomplish? What do you want your team to experience? What do they need to learn about? I got a master's in industrial relations and HR and stuff like that. So, what can I help your group learn? And I would also ask, how's it going with your team? Just how's it going? What's the nature of the interactions like between you and them? And what I always heard every single time was, well, they're pretty good, they're okay, but I wish. And then the manager would go through this wish list. Like, I wish they were prepared for ops meetings. I wish they wouldn't complain about sunrise meetings at 7 a.m. because that's what we do around here. I wish they would stop having side conversations in meetings. I wish they would resolve issues they know how to resolve themselves without bugging me. I wish they would blah, 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 blah. And I'd say, Great, thank you. I'd write it all down, and then a day later, I'd meet with the team in a focus group without the manager, and I'd go around the table and, what's going well, what's not going well, and what do you need to learn? What do you want to do with the team building day? And how's it going with your boss? And you can guess what I heard. We wish. He's okay, or she's okay. They're not the best manager we've ever had, but they're not the worst. He means well, but we wish he appreciated our work. We wish he recognized we have to adjust our family life to get here at 7 a.m. 3 times a week. We wish he would fill the missing position that's been open on our team for so long, and the extra work is hurting us. We wish he would advocate more with the level above and get us the raises we've been looking for. Blah, 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 blah. And I left these meetings thinking, don't these two parties talk to each other? Don't they ever, these are all reasonable wishes. These are not ridiculous, shoot for the moon things. These are reasonable workplace, professional needs and expectations of each other that just have not been communicated. So I kind of felt like a marriage counselor, right? So, I bring the team together and I say, you guys need to talk.
Yeah.
And it started as an exchange of just expectations. What do we need from each other? Which turned out to be very helpful, but the process evolved, and later on I left the company and started consulting, and Tim and I kind of evolved it. So now it's the exchange of obligations first and then expectations, which turns out to be really important. Because when I start off with what do I owe you, Doug, so you feel supported, can be successful, it puts me in a service mindset. I'm starting off by thinking, how do I help my partner? It puts me in a helping first mode. Then what do I need to get back?
Yeah.
Secondary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it turns out the obligation forward first is important. Then only secondarily, what do I need? It turns out the compare and contrast between one side's obligations and the other side's expectations, and you map them together, turns out to be fascinating and a real eye-opener.
Yeah.
And then it turns out signing. I mean, you mentioned you were from a banking background. Well, guess what leaseholders do, or what mortgagees do? Okay. They don't just say, well, I promise.
You sign the document.
They write stuff down.
You sign it.
Yeah, you sign it. And signing it turns out to be an enhanced level of commitment.
Yeah. I love it. I tell you what, we're going to take a short commercial break here. And when we get back, we're going to dive a little more into the ways that this can actually be implemented and executed with your team if you are at a place and you want to make a few changes. So we'll get into that right after this break.
Business is all about solving complex problems as fast as you can create them. Become the best problem solver by leading others to greatness too. And the first step is going to DougThorpe.com. Doug Thorpe is known globally for coaching entrepreneurs and business leaders, improving their performance and the work output of everyone surrounding them. You can find health, wealth, and happiness by learning to lead others to health, wealth, and happiness. Go to DougThorpe.com now and order Doug's books or hire him to coach your managers. That's DougThorpe.com.
Hello, everyone. We're back. You are listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I'm Doug Thorpe, and my guest today is Dr. Seth Silver. We've been talking about a meaningful partnership at work, creating that covenant relationship between manager and employee and vice versa. And one of the key phrases right in the top of your book, Seth, is two in a canoe. I love that. To kind of really get to the core of what this kind of covenant building relationship you're talking about. We talked about the basic discussion to have, but I want to bring up the scenario where a manager is in a situation, maybe he or she has gotten transferred into a new unit. So the team has some history, team's pre-existing, and the manager's the new person. How should that person go about turning this on in that new situation?
So let me give you a 30-second theoretical professorial hat on, and then I'll give it a bit more practically. So our good researcher friend, Bruce Tuckman from 1965 would tell you that all new teams go through form, storm, norm, and perform. I'm sure your listeners have heard that recipe before. And it happens when there's anything dramatically different about the team. You get a new manager, or there's a significant number of new players, or the team is just brand new. The organization says, hey, let's put a team over here. Let's pull this guy, Charlie, and let's pull these 5 people. We'll call that a team. So when something, major is happening to the team, they go through these 4 stages, right? Form, storm, norm, perform. For a lot of teams, that takes a long time. The forming and the storming really gets to, okay, we're together, but who's got strengths and what are our cultural values? And do we meet on time, or are we 5 minutes late? Or who's the go-to person for this process and the go-to person for that decision? And that can take a long, long time. And there can be a lot of trial and error. There can be a lot of mistakes. There can be a lot of inadvertent pushing of hot buttons. For a lot of teams, that can take months of churn before they get to norm and perform. So the beauty of this workplace covenant process and meaningful partnership is it accelerates that almost literally in a day. Because you have a new manager, you're going to go through form, storm, norm, perform again anyway. The question really is not whether, it's just how long that's going to take. So if you have this conversation around obligations and expectations, and you share it and you discuss it fully and you make some agreements, to a large extent, you've gotten through the form and the storm in an afternoon or a morning, 3.5 hours. And you're getting much more quickly to the norm and perform levels. I would also say, creating a new covenant or a covenant is helpful if you've got, 30 or 40% of the team that's changed. Off camera, we were talking about how often do you do this? And I would, if a manager does this with a team, the manager will sometimes come to us and say, Tim and me, the co-author of the book, when do I need to redo this? And our pat answer is you really don't, unless something brand new in the work changes. But if you were to lose 30% of your team, if you're 10 people and 3 people roll off and you get 3 new ones, you may want to redo it. If the manager gets changed, you absolutely want to redo it. If your team gets folded into something larger, then of course you'll want to redo it. Otherwise, what you create has probably got a shelf life of about 3 years, 4 years. And then I think it makes sense to just sort of say, okay, let's look at this fresh and redo it.
And how about the distinction between, we talked in the first half about having that one-on-one with a new hire or somebody joining the team from outside. But what about the manager's discussion with the team at large, in a group setting as a true team unit? Hey guys, rally around the flag. Here's where we're going. How does that layer into this?
Well, I think it gives you the basis of what you're going to talk about. I think enormously it helps you with the structure of that conversation and the content. If you have a covenant, the manager can say, hey, look, guys, you signed this. I mean, here's 8 signatures, all 8 of you signed this, and here are the 10 things you agreed to. Let's talk about the first one. I think in the last 3 months, it's gone pretty well, but here's where I think it hasn't gone so well. And I think we need to do this a bit better and this a bit better. Here's 3 things I think you've done really, really well. So kudos, well done. Here's, number 8 on the list and of the list of 10. And let's talk about that one. By the way, here's my covenant to you. What I'd like to do is go around the table and get an opinion on, what I could do better. Save the praise, save the what kissing. I don't need to hear the compliments, but just tell me 1 or 2 things I could do to improve being a good coach, or getting information to you in a timely way, or advocating for the group with the levels above to make sure you have the resources you need. I want some improvement. Tell me how I can be a better partner. And so I think it gives the manager talking points, frankly. It gives him or her real direction in how to have that group level conversation, particularly about how they work together, but also how they can be more effective.
And I like that. And it definitely is something that needs to be done at that team level. And with many of my executive leadership development clients, I challenge them about whether or not they have yet created a vision for what they think their team is supposed to be doing. And I won't say frequently, but it happens more than I wanted to have guessed, that they kind of look at me like a deer in the headlight. Well, I wait on that for my boss. And it's like, no, bad answer. You need to have your own vision of what this needs to be about. And yes, you need to socialize that and get it aligned with your boss. And you need to have your covenant discussions with them. But you need to take on the burden of carrying some kind of vision for where you think your team ought to be going.
So one of the silver bullets, Seth Silver, silver bullets, the book is littered with these aphorisms that are intended to be helpful to teams and managers. And one of them is, You have to first talk about the how you work together before you can get to the what you're going to do together. And so in many ways, this mindset of partnership, this ERTAP stuff, this workplace covenant process and the reviews of it that go on is really all about the how we work together. And that's a bit different than the vision. So I want to come back to the vision thing because I'm a little leadership guy. My doctoral dissertation was on leadership. I published, and I love leadership as a topic, and it's one I can always increase my learning on. And so when you talk about vision, yes, indeed, I think that is something incumbent on the leader. I think that gets to the what we're doing, or why we're doing it, actually, is probably a better word to use here, the why we're doing it. But that's a collaborative conversation. To me, I think if the leader says, well, here's the vision for you guys, they may or may not buy into it. People become committed to things they help create. I think you can talk a little bit about, we're in business for the last 50 years because we do X, and the slogan of our company is, but let's make that real at our level. Our department does this. So let's talk about what the vision is. And if I were the manager of that team, I would say, okay, here's a bit that we can piggyback on, but let's have the conversation. What do you guys think the vision is? I recall doing strategic planning and stuff, and there was always the whole development of a mission statement. And I love the 4 questions: who we are, what we do, for whom, and why. A mission statement should answer that. Who we are, what we do, for whom, and the most important is why.
Yeah. No, I actually agree with you in what you just described. And when I challenge these leaders to talk about vision, what I try to do is just challenge them on the question of whether or not they individually have tried to synthesize the gold letters on the corporate wall that says, here's our mission, vision, and purpose. But now what does your unit do to contribute to that? And how can you distill all that down into a unit level definition of what you're about? And absolutely, I agree. If you can take that and perhaps you at least lay out the starting framework and give it to your team to fill in the blanks and put meat on the bones, so to speak. And maybe they come up with a new bone that goes with it. Who knows? But I think there needs to be some leadership in that effort, and not just throw a blank page at the team and go, why do you guys think we're here? Where are we going to go?
Yeah, no, you don't start with, as you say, a blank page, but
you have to have a little bit of a rally point or framework to lead off with. But no, I agree with how you said it.
I think this would be more motivating for people. We talked earlier about Generation Z, or whatever the letter is now, the under 30 crowd who are at work. I think they are craving meaning, and I think actual times where you take, I wouldn't do this every day in every staff meeting, but whatever the frequency is. It's funny, I just had this conversation with a coachee yesterday too. He's in a construction company, and we were talking about the vision thing and really the big why and how often to get into that. And I think it's probably quarterly. An actual rule of thumb, I think, is quarterly. Come back to the why are we doing what we're doing? Well, what is the big why? Again, not just the what we do or the how we do it, but the why we're doing it. And go a little deeper. What is the value add to our client or customer as a result of the product or service that we're bringing? And again, we're a little off topic from the book now, but I do think this notion of why is not addressed enough. A lot of people are just in the grind, doing their thing, working for the paycheck. Why am I doing this? To get the paycheck so I can pay my mortgage, so I can send my kids to school. It's bigger than that, And I reminded my coachee yesterday that, hey, you're not just doing this for a paycheck, even though you probably get a pretty big one. You're a director around here. You've just shared with me all the fun you had in coaching others. It's clear to me that one of the reasons you come to work every day is to see other people grow. This fellow in his late 50s has taken a liking to using a model I taught him on how to coach people, and now he's using it with people who are 10 years or less in the company, so typically in the late 20s, early 30s age range, and helping them solve problems and become more confident and competent. And he's finding, lo and behold, that's a real kick. That's a real kick in the pants for him. He's really loving being the coach. And I pointed out the obvious, that one of his whys is not only the paycheck, of course, but seeing people grow.
Right. Similarly to that, I've found that in the situations where I get asked to come in and work with some very senior executives, and by senior I mean literally chronologically, they're longer in their career and nearing that magic retirement window, whatever that might be,
Social Security age.
but nonetheless, the company's decided we're doing a unilateral at this grade level, we're going to do coaching. And so you run into some of those guys. And what I've found most productive with them, because oftentimes their initial reaction when we finally get one-on-one, they go, I don't know why the company's doing this. I mean, I'm going to be out the door in 3 years. And, they know that. I know that. I don't understand. I turn that back on them and I ask them if they've ever thought about what they want their legacy to be. And have you spent any time thinking about the reputation you're building and what can you leave a fingerprint on this part of the organization when you go? And I've actually had some of those guys literally go to tears when I hit them with that question.
Sure.
And they stop, without exception, they stop dead in their tracks and go, some of them will say, I hadn't thought about that. Others will say, I've been thinking about that, but not in this context. And then
what's said about you at your retirement party.
And then the quick thing I always tell them, because I'm usually talking, we're talking Fortune 100 kind of companies. I'll tell them, this company's not going to put your name on a building. We're not talking about that, but can you write your name in the hearts and minds of the people you're influencing right now? And do you want them saying, wow, I'm glad this person was in my life for a season? And what does that do for you? And man, they all just dive right in.
Well, it's funny. I mentioned Xerox earlier. I'm not sure where they're at now. I've been detached from them professionally since 98. So what is that, 20 something years? But I know they named 2 buildings after beloved managers, not because these guys were donors or they weren't division presidents or anything, but they were beloved chief engineers who had an impact on people, and they named 2 buildings after.
Well, okay. I'll adjust my story then.
So it does happen occasionally.
It can happen.
Someone makes enough of an impact and is beloved enough in the organization,
and
has contributed enough. But your point's well taken, and I think you're kind of getting at, what do you want said about you at your retirement party? What do you want said maybe at your eulogy? I guess the other 2 words that come to mind quickly when those people who are 3 years from retiring say, well, what are we doing this for? I would just give them 2 words: knowledge transfer.
Yeah.
Knowledge transfer and experience transfer. And there's a mentoring role they can play that's unique.
No doubt about it. One last thought I want to get into, and I have not seen it in the book yet, and maybe I haven't gotten all the way through properly, but there's a theme that I see emerging, and I know in my work, and I get into it a lot. Managers want to talk about the struggle with creating accountability in the workplace. And I think, well, on the one hand, I'm going to counter what I just said about the book. I think the whole thing about the covenant agreement really pretty much nails traditional sense of accountability, because you do talk about expectations and obligations. But the way I'm trying to flip the script on that is to have leaders start talking to their teams about more of an inspiration, instead of top down setting a standard that you have to strive to achieve and be accountable for. You go bottom up and you challenge the people with saying, how can you be counted on by the other members of this team and by me as your manager? And what are you willing to do to be counted on as you do your work? What does that look like? And I've got my own very unscientific case histories already building now with some of my coaching clients who have grabbed this and really found it resonates well, and they're working it with their teams.
So you mentioned accountability and the extent to which it kind of takes hold in an organization's culture or the way it operates. I've actually written an article recently. You can't have accountability without expectations and clear expectations. So I think that's a starting point. The expectations have to be clear. If they're implicit and not clearly discussed and agreed to, people are held accountable to behaviors or norms for which they may be unaware. The second issue with accountability is it two-way? You know, it's fine for managers and leaders to hold their direct reports and teams accountable for performance targets, but to what extent are those managers accountable back up to their teams?
Yep.
You know, in our political system, imperfect as it is, we hold our leaders accountable at least every 4 years or 2 years, and in theory, we can get rid of them at such point. I won't get into a side conversation on that, but in theory, the system is intelligently built that way. You know, accountability is there. So I think managers need to put up or shut up. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And that's why this process, I think, is particularly effective, because the manager is saying, okay, here's my covenant to you. You can hold me accountable to this. I am going to accept feedback. I'm going to give feedback to myself and share it with you. And only then am I going to hold you guys accountable to your covenant. So I'm the leader. If you look in the dictionary under lead, L-E-A-D, one of the definitions is, guess what? To go first. Right? Managers should go first.
Right.
And so I think it's important for the manager to hold his or her covenant up and say, okay, you know, here's 10 things I signed up for. Here's my signature and date. I think I'm doing 5 of these things well. I think 5 of them I could improve on, and here's how. And, you know, please give me additional feedback. Okay, now it's my turn. You know, here's your covenant, and here's how I think you guys are doing. So I think that two-way street is necessary for the process to have integrity.
Yeah.
Then accountability becomes a lot more real. When the employees know that they can hold their manager accountable, and they really can hold their manager, I mean, not fire the manager, but give the manager feedback and be safe doing it.
Right.
Then I think you've got a whole different climate.
Right. Well, and then we get into the whole argument, which we're not going to have time to do today, but the whole notion of that leader having the, another popular word today is emotional intelligence to be vulnerable, transparent, empathetic, open for that discussion to be had. And again, we go back to the basic definition of why some managers are better than others. We've still got those guys in seats of authority that aren't ready to pony up to that yet. So
in the book, are you familiar with the TV sitcom Big Bang Theory?
Oh yeah.
Okay, and you know the character Sheldon Cooper, Dr. Yep. Sheldon Cooper, who of course is typified in the show as being IQ high and EQ low, right? He's a brilliant physicist and professor, right, but he's got the people smarts of a rock, right? Yeah. Nothing.
Right.
And we make reference to that character in the book and note that this process can actually sometimes work well with those techie types for whom the touchy-feely of let's talk about how we're working together, Doug, and see if we can improve it. That conversation is difficult or impossible. It feels too touchy-feely. But the process of, okay, what do you need from me to feel supported? And as we begin to wind our conversation, you know, down, and to your listeners, I guess I'd offer one particularly cogent piece of advice. If you want to improve your leadership, get up in the morning and think to yourself the answer to this question. What do I need to do to help my team feel supported and be successful? And if you do stuff all day long to address those two things, you're going to kill it. You're just going to kill it. You're going to do 98% of what you need to do right. You're going to say thank you. You need to say thank you. You're going to say you're doing a great job. You're going to say, how can I help remove that obstacle? You're going to listen more attentively. You're going to help the new person acquire the skills. You're going to help the senior person feel valued. You're going to do all the right things because your mindset is, how do I help my partners, my team, feel supported and be successful?
Yeah.
And
I love that.
So
I think that's a good word to sign off with here. So thank you for that tidbit. And so, Seth, if listeners want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
So on social media, I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Seth R. Silver, Seth R. Silver. You can reach me that way. My email is drsethRsilver@gmail.com. I have a website, which is silverconsultinginc.com. Again, silverconsultinginc.com, all one word.
Okay.
And those are the best ways to do it. But I'd love if your listeners picked up a copy of the book, and I'd be happy, you know, if they want to call me or email me a question or anything about the book, I would love to discuss by Zoom or through LinkedIn or some other medium. But I hope they Google it, go to Amazon.com, and for $29 they can get it.
We'll do that. And folks, we'll have all that information in the show notes here if you missed it on the fly. And with that, I'll also remind you, if you're listening to the audio version of this on your favorite streaming channel, we do have a video version over on YouTube by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, take a view, give us a like, give us a comment, and check out any of the other information that's available there. I want to thank you one last time, Seth, for coming in and sharing with us. This is good stuff.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Doug.
And folks, thank you for spending your moment with us, and we hope to see you again real soon. For now, we're going to say goodbye and take care.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.